Hello and welcome to this lecture on factors affecting body weight. In this lecture, we're going to cover a couple theories on how body weight is regulated. And then we're going to look at some metabolic, physiologic, as well as cultural, social, and economic factors that affect body weight. And then we'll look at all the various ways that we can modify body weight based on healthy behavior changes. This is sort of a continuation from the lecture on diseases associated with body weight. So we'll look at the thrifty gene theory and the set point theory. Important to know that theories are theories; they're not facts. So theories are ways that have been commonly agreed to think about something, while understanding that it is not proven to be known or factual. So there's a theory that some folks might possess a gene to be more energetically thrifty. This is the thrifty gene theory. So if we have more energetically thrifty genes, or if our genes cause our bodies to be more energetically thrifty, then what that may look like is, as we go about our lives, doing standard activities of living, we may actually be expending less energy to do these things than somebody who doesn't have the thrifty gene. This would mean then that person would be more likely to maintain or gain weight than someone whose genes aren't energetically thrifty. This theory is derived out of looking at how humans have evolved and knowing that not very long ago, humans experienced much more famine than we do currently in modern times. And so individuals who are able to survive through times with low food availability maybe had this advantageous gene to be energetically thrifty. So when food was sparse, these folks were able to survive because they expended so little energy doing normal activities of living. So they were able to survive well until the next time that food was available. So that's the thrifty gene theory in brief, as well as a brief explanation of the origin of that theory. Then there's another theory called the set point theory, and this suggests that each individual body biologically has a range, maybe 10 to 20 pound range, where that body is healthiest and will generally always reside for weight. This theory goes that, depending on the circumstances of life, that person might sort of subconsciously, the body might raise or lower energy expenditure based on food intake. So if food intake is excessive, perhaps the body actually expends more energy digesting and absorbing and processing that food, thus keeping the energy balance more in check. So again, sort of suggesting someone trying to gain or lose weight may struggle to do so outside of their set point range, because there will be a biological drive to keep that body always within the set point range. Again, theories, not necessarily factual. Here is perhaps one of the biggest controversies on relying on gene theory. I think this middle sentence right here says it pretty well. When we give too much weight to gene theories, then environmental factors sort of get left in the dust. We know that even if genes influence our body weight, we also know very well that environmental factors do too. How we move our bodies, what we do with our bodies, and what we eat has a very strong influence on body weight. So if we put too much weight in the gene theory, then we might overlook the environmental factors and thus think, oh, well, there's nothing we can do about weight because it's all genetic, when really there's a tremendous amount that we can do to affect weight. So let's look at how diet composition can affect fat deposition on the body. Certainly, quite simply, any excess of calories, again, going back to energy balance, any excess of calories, no matter what they come from, is going to cause fat deposition. So if someone eats, if their energy expenditure in a day is 2,000 calories, and so their body requires about 2,000 calories to bring in, any excess of 2,000 calories is going to lead to weight gain and fat deposition. We have an ability to convert most amino acids into fat molecules as well as glucose into fat molecules, and that is how we store energy on the body. So when we consume these molecules in excess, we'll convert them into a simple fat and then store them in our adipose tissue. And then certainly excess consumption of fat would lead to fat deposition on the body. Fat for humans is a storage form of energy. So when it comes into the body in excess, we are sort of biologically wired to hold on to it and store it. Then there are a few metabolic factors that also affect weight that are worth noting. As we mentioned in the earlier lecture, metabolic rate will affect body composition, so someone who, and vice versa, so someone who has a higher fat content, fat is less metabolically active than muscle, and so someone with a higher fat content would have a lower basal metabolic rate than someone with more muscle mass. We also mentioned spontaneous physical activity before. Someone who engages in spontaneous physical activity is likely to have a lower overall body weight than someone who doesn't do a lot of spontaneous physical activity. This goes along with sympathetic nervous system activity. This is kind of the fight or flight portion of our brain. So again, someone who's just kind of active more often than someone who's not is going to would have a higher basal metabolic rate and thus a lower body weight. And then lastly, fat oxidation. So fat oxidation refers to breaking down fat to use it as energy. Someone with actually extra body weight or extra fat mass is going to have lower rates of fat oxidation than someone who has a healthier body weight. And then we'll look at a few physiologic factors affecting weight. We're going to look in particular at these two hormones, leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is the hormone that tells our brain after a meal, this is enough, we are satisfied, you can stop eating. Leptin is actually produced by our adipose tissue. So what happens is once we've been fed enough, the fat tissue might recognize, oh, okay, we're at the place where we've eaten enough, and if we eat any more, we're going to start depositing fat. So let's discontinue eating so that we don't add to our fat storage. And in fact, if necessary, we could actually break down some of our stored fat to use that for energy, along with the components of our meal. Someone who is overweight and has extra fat mass on the body is at a risk for something called leptin resistance, where there's so much adipose tissue and so much leptin being produced after a meal that the body might actually stop responding to leptin. And the brain in particular might stop responding to leptin. So that's an issue with extra adipose tissue. And then ghrelin is a hormone produced by the stomach, also communicates with the brain, and this is the hormone that says, hey, we're hungry, time to eat. I like to think of the sound grr with ghrelin and thinking of the stomach rumbling when we're hungry. So you'll hear that grr rumbling when we're hungry, which is indicating that ghrelin is being secreted. Ghrelin, interestingly, when someone is trying to diet through extreme calorie restriction in order to lose weight, ghrelin production might actually increase. So extreme calorie restriction for weight loss and we see actually, anecdotally and in research studies, we see that extreme calorie restriction for weight loss is counterproductive to weight loss. And this may be because ghrelin production actually increases during severe calorie restriction. And that kind of makes sense. The body wants to eat, the body needs calories, and if we are restricting the calories, then it makes sense that the body would do whatever it can to say, hey, come on, eat something. And then one other physiologic factor affecting weight would be brown adipose tissue. This is a much more metabolically active type of adipose tissue than white adipose tissue. Brown adipose tissue you may actually see striated between muscle fibers in endurance athletes. Again, at lower intensity, longer duration activities, the body will actually be preferentially using fat for energy production, and so there is certainly an advantage to having some fat tissue interspersed amongst the muscle tissue for okay. And then a few other physiologic factors to consider. There are several ways that the body influences satiety, which is again like satisfaction after a meal. Two other hormones, serotonin and cholecystokinin. We'll look at those in more detail when we study digestion. Also, when we eat a meal, blood glucose levels naturally go up, and that's a natural indication to the brain that we can discontinue eating because we've just received food, so we don't need more. Also, again, we'll explore this more when we study digestion. The stomach has the capacity to expand and contract. So as we eat, the stomach fills up and expands. And that expansion will also signal to the brain, hey, we're getting full, we're getting fed, we can discontinue shortly. As well, when we are digesting our food and we start to absorb the nutrients out of the small intestine from our food, that is also a signal to the brain that we don't need to eat anymore because we are getting what we need. Similarly, on the opposite end, there are factors that decrease satiety and thus cause us to eat more. As blood glucose levels drop, that indicates to the brain, uh-oh, we need to eat something because glucose, which is the primary energy substrate for all cells in the body, is getting low. So we need to eat to replenish blood glucose levels. Also, beta endorphins are hormones that stimulate a sense of pleasure when we're eating, and oftentimes these encourage us to eat more. So interesting to just sort of be aware of our bodies when we're eating and be aware of the pleasure in eating. It's a very natural thing for humans to enjoy eating, as with most animals. So being aware of our physiologic drive and that pleasure of eating, trying to not give in to overindulging. And then there's also something called neuropeptide Y, which is just another physiologic factor in the body that stimulates appetite and eating. All right, and then outside of the body, lots of other things that affect how we eat and thus could affect weight. So certainly at celebrations, when we're around family and friends, we might feel a sense of pressure to eat and or overeat. Also, we are influenced strongly by the media. We see lots of commercials for food. We might be triggered to go eat even when we're not hungry. We might also see media images with a very sort of negative representation of what a healthy body weight is. So understanding that the bodies we see in the media aren't always truly representative of the range of healthy body weights that is realistic for humans. Also the ubiquity of vending machines that contain high fat, energy dense foods. Also knowing that when we are under a lot of stress, a lot of us tend to use food as a coping mechanism. There's also an assumption that eating healthy is more expensive when really it doesn't have to be that way. Certainly a lot of packaged processed health foods are more expensive, but some of the healthiest foods available to humans, rice, beans, and vegetables, are among the cheapest foods available. There's also an issue with access to food depending on where somebody lives or where they work. There's a concept we'll explore at the end of the semester called food desert, and this indicates living or working in a place without realistic access to healthy, fresh food. So that would, of course, influence how that person can eat, and thus influence the composition of the food, which could strongly influence weight gain. All right, and then several slides here of different behaviors that we can engage in to either lose weight, gain weight if necessary, and otherwise maintain a healthy body weight long term. Avoiding diets across the board is a good idea, especially fad diets that ask you to restrict either the total number of calories really excessively or restrict specific macronutrients or specific food groups. A healthy diet is varied, is all-encompassing, is moderate, and is well-balanced, and is adequate. And so any diet that's suggesting gross or severe restriction of any food is likely not going to be a diet that can maintain a healthy weight long term. As we looked at before, losing a pound of body weight a week is realistic. So restricting 500 calories a day is probably realistic for most people. For some people, that may not be realistic, and that should be modified even further to lose only a half pound a week and therefore restrict only 250 calories a day. Certainly just eating smaller portions, eating throughout the day rather than trying to eat all of our calories at one meal, especially dinner. Sort of swapping the traditional American way of eating. Typically, a lot of folks eat a small breakfast, a small lunch, and then a huge dinner. Well, our bodies are most metabolically active during the morning and the early parts of the afternoon. So it is not advantageous to the body to eat most of our calories in the evening when our metabolic activity is slowing down. It's much more advantageous to eat most of those calories in the morning and the early afternoon when our bodies are actually active, and then having a very light dinner. Also eating nutrient-dense foods. These are, again, basically whole foods, things like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, legumes, lentils, nuts, seeds, and lean meats and fish. Reducing intake of highly processed foods. Quite simply, if we all cut out highly processed foods or reduce our intake of these things to once a week to once every other week, we would have a significant improvement in our overall weight. Engage in activity, write a grocery list. Don't bring foods into your house or workplace that are unhealthy. Eat slowly, enjoy your food with all five senses. Recognize that eating is pleasurable and take pleasure in eating. That way, once you've finished your meal, you've fully enjoyed it and you can discontinue from eating and move on to something else. Similarly, don't do anything else while you're eating. Just eat and enjoy your meal. If it's helpful, maybe keep a record of what you eat, when you eat, and why you eat. Are you stress eating? Are you boredom eating? Are you eating because you're sad or angry or lonely? It's fine if these are reasons for eating, but if you're trying to lose weight or maintain a healthful weight, then you might want to modify that behavior and do it less often. This phrase, breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper, is again getting at this idea of eating more of our calories during our waking hours and having a very light, small dinner. Planning ahead is pretty key, especially with busy lives. So, shop once a week for all of your staples and make sure you have enough food to feed you throughout the week. Share food with others. Again, enjoy sharing food with others. Also, be kind to yourself. We all make mistakes. One unhealthy meal isn't going to make or break us, but if we have unhealthy meals all day, every day, that's going to be problematic long term.